hungry for gold, gotta learn to let it go.
Welcome to Wake the F Up podcast, where we talk about living consciously and helping people uncover their essential selves so that they can stop sleepwalking through life. Welcome to Wake the F Up podcast. I am your host, Alix Long, and today I am flying solo in the hot seat, and I'm so excited to have two of my very favorite practitioners, healers, and embodiment practitioners, Cally Skye and Dionne Eleanor, here. And we are so excited. Welcome to the new year. And last year, not too long ago, we hosted a retreat in Quimixto, Mexico, so a little south of Puerto Vallarta. And I'm just really pumped to be able to have an opportunity to kind of explain to our listeners when, why, and how you are ready to take on something like a retreat and what it looks like from the back end of this. And so I thought we would start maybe just a little bit of like intro. So for those of you who may or may not know, some of you just listen to the podcast. David and I own a company called Wake Wellness. It actually started quite some time ago. Cally and I did a retreat several years back, and I've been doing retreats for over 10 years. Cally's been doing retreats for over 10 years. And then Dionne happened to work at the facility that we did on our second major retreat. And so she kind of folded in and actually became David and I's, I like to call you our Tantra therapist, but you can tell me the label. She has lots of labels, but the Tantra work is really what David loves to claim the most. And so all three of us work together in lots of different facets, but so 2024 was the Wake Wellness Rebirth Retreat, and I was pregnant on bed rest, going through all kinds of shenanigans, as you well know. And Dionne and Cally led the retreat for me, along with Katie, who's out on a little bit of a stomach bug. So we are wishing her well. So I'm going to start with you, Cal. Just tell me a little bit about what you do, who you are, how you got involved with Wake and retreats in general.
I like to say that I have all my hands in the cookie jars at all times, and maybe it's the ADHD brain of mine, but for the retreat stuff specifically, I'm doing all things yoga, sound meditations. I sing my butt off, play some flutes, breath work, and essentially just laugh and cry my way through everything that I do. I haven't been doing retreats for over 10 years, but over the past, probably I'd say 5 years, I've done retreats, whether they're virtual or in person. And the Wake ones have been, absolutely life-changing for myself, not only as a practitioner, but also just as a person, because if you've been to a retreat or not, or if you're thinking about it, the practitioners get just as much out of it as the participants do. And I knew going into this one that I was about to come head to head with some of my own shit. And that's the real beauty of retreats is no one escapes the kind of hard truths and the beauty that come from that space. And I'm just really grateful to be at any single thing that you allow me to be a part of. And doing this last one with Dionne was really such a treat. And I feel like coming back from it almost sent me into a depression, because I was like, I think I'm meant to live my life there. What am I doing here?
I feel that way almost every time we go on retreat, but especially in Quimixto. There's something very special about that space, the land, and I think really the culture and the people. It's indigenous land, so it's so beautiful, and you really can't own land there unless you have lived and are from the lineage of you. Even if you marry in, you can't own your own land. So it's really beautiful in that way, that these people are protecting their culture and their land, and they are who are, running a lot of the different activities that are offered at Mixto, as well as doing all the culinary and the food. And I don't know, just like it's something so special about that pride that they have at Quimixto and Mixto. So anyway, I'm going to introduce Dionne, who actually is a native. So I wouldn't say native, but she's from all over the planet, but London originally, and has been living in Mexico for how long now? You've been in Mexico for a while.
Well, 5.5 years. And they do call me native. They say I'm Mexican. And even before we moved here, it was really interesting. People would say that I'm quite Mexican. So I didn't think I would live here, but I do. And so I've been in Mexico about 5.5 years, was born in the UK. And I've been working on retreats and in the wellness sector for about 14 years, maybe a bit longer. When you start saying these numbers, you start to feel old. But then then I'm really grateful, because people usually think I'm younger than what I am. And then, people need to know that you've got some experience when you do this type of work. So the type of work that I do is relationship. I'm a relationship and empowerment mentor. And so what that means is I look at helping people to remove the barriers to their best lives. I do a lot of work, as Alix mentioned, using Tantra as a philosophy, but I also explore the pillars of intergenerational trauma, leadership, and I look at relationship training skills as well as your overall well-being. And the idea is that rather than just focusing just on the physical body or just on the mind, we're really looking at a holistic way of empowering yourself. I've done a lot of work over the last few years in the area of grief. So when I met Alix and Cally, it was like the perfect match in heaven. I've always said that I don't really care how it happens, but I just want this message about healing trauma and grief to be in the world and to make the resources a lot more accessible to people. So that's a little bit about me. And as Cally said, these retreats are so fascinating. We do a lot of work in leading the retreat, but we also find that we find those little hidden corners of our own healing as well. So it's a very powerful retreat, and I'm looking forward to sharing more about what we discovered.
Yeah, it's so exciting. And I was having mad FOMO, of course. So I was at home and had a new baby and was a little bit still bedridden post-operatively. And I'm seeing these two beautiful women are leading this amazing group. And it was actually a little bit more of an intimate group this time. And I felt like really a lot of power in that space and in that room with the different personality types that came. And we prepare for these retreats for an entire year. And so this one particularly is unique because Mixto is a really smaller venue, very private. It has its own chef, its own bartender / he makes like any kind of non-alcoholic and alcoholic beverages. They have their own huge, beautiful yoga space that I think it looks like this year even better. Like there's basically water that runs down, and then you've got the ocean on one side, and it's literally like full of wildlife. I mean, there's lizards and birds of every kind and species that you can imagine. You'll see whales. We tend to always operate this retreat during the whale migration season, and they're actually coming down to Mexico at that time of the year to birth their babies, which, talk about some rebirth. It's so stunning. I mean, it's making my hair stand up now thinking about the whales. The wildlife is incredible, and there's mountains and there's streams, and it's insane. So one of the big things that we're working on at the Wake Wellness platform is we're growing our platform, and behind the scenes, there's a lot going on, and working around and trying to identify. I've been working very hard this year to identify what are the pillars of this company and what are we really about. Emotions can be so challenging because there's so many of them, and they all kind of interweave. But what we really focus on is taking loss and the shattering that happens from a loss and helping people learn to love themselves through such a hardship and get on the other side so that they can love themselves first and then learn to rebuild and build the life that they've always dreamed of. Because when we look at David and I's life and we look at all the practitioners that have been in our company, we know the fragility of our existence, and we know how fragile and beautiful life is, and we just want people to live it fully for themselves. And so when you guys are thinking about some of these pillars, we're working on this concept called love, and love stands for basically all the things, the tenets of this company. And the first step in love is really listening inside. And so setting the stage of our retreat this year for Rebirth, the biggest thing that we've been teaching our clients for quite some time is how to go inside and how to listen. And so I wanted to know from your perspective, how does it feel to witness people going inside? What are the things maybe you do at home to prepare yourself to be a leader, to set stages and energies and hold space for this kind of inner work that people are not accustomed to in the busy world. And maybe you guys could just share a little bit about your expertise in teaching people to go inside. Cally, you're starting. Sorry.
We have like a talking stick.
You have the stick now, Cally.
Thank you. In the framework of witnessing people discover things about themselves, I think that's the most amazing thing to see in these spaces, because we get caught in the busyness and we forget to pause, whether that's with ourselves or our partners or even our friends. And if you do that long enough, you really create a large distance between who you are and who you're existing as. And when you're coming back to your true self and even like learning how to speak your needs, like I remember when a goal of mine in a past chapter of my own life was, do I even know what I want right now? Because I was so out of practice with voicing what I needed. And I think there were so many people, and maybe everyone in the retreat this year had a moment for themselves or a theme throughout the week where it's like you could see them from the beginning and you could see them at the end. And a few people in particular come to mind where like this woman who attended this last retreat, and I won't share names, but I remember she felt at the beginning of the retreat and even up until like the last couple of days that interjecting herself and her stories, she would go for like 10 seconds and be like, okay, I'm done. You know, because it can feel so, I mean, it can really shake you when you're allowing yourself to be seen. And I think that's the biggest thing through all of this is like, we have to, it's a practice of letting ourselves be seen, trying and failing, crying, whatever it is. And that's what creates a deeper connection to ourselves and to other people. Like, there's a lot of times where we might want to fill space because it's out of anxiousness, or, you know, maybe it's a trauma response of feeling lonely. But when we're filling up space and we're not allowing ourselves to also listen and give and receive, as it's like, that's how we build relationships. And I think seeing people let down their walls slowly but surely really it was the greatest medicine that any of us could have had through that, is just seeing everyone and being a witness to the becoming of ourselves in that space.
I love that. Dionne, how about you? Are you in the same alignment with Cally? I mean, I know that you are, but in some ways, Dionne does a lot there. I mean, she's a shaman and hosts cacao ceremonies and multiple ceremonies. So you're holding space in lots of different ways in a retreat venue. Talk to me about how you get people to listen in various atmospheres that you set.
Yeah, so I would agree with pretty much everything Cally said. And from the shamanic perspective, but in general, you know, I think the interesting thing, well, one thing I shared this on the retreat about being a shaman is that traditionally you are initiated, and after that point you don't share because you are then stepping into this egoic space, but the community will give you your name as a shaman. So they will be the ones that refer, but you don't walk around typically saying that you're a shaman. Well, that's the way that I was initiated into the path. So if it seems like I never use that title, that is why I let the community bring that in. For me, it's the same regardless of whether I'm in a corporate office or in a retreat center. The priority is safety and comfort initially. And this is the requirement for people to be able to open up, and also for people to be able to listen. So if you're really cold or really hot, you're going to be distracted by, you know, the elements to be able to tune in or even share. And so something that both me and Cally did when we were holding space, whether it was for a workshop or teaching breathwork or yoga, would be that we'd make sure there was enough props and that people were comfortable depending on their body's needs and how their bodies were feeling. We were aware of how the temperature was, whether people needed a little bit longer for breakfast, if somebody needed an extra bolster, being mindful of who is there and trying to look at our body language and their body language. So leading and holding the space, it's important that our body language is open, that we're not slouching to one side and have a mobile in our hand. Like if the mobile is in our hand, there's a purpose behind it. Also noticing what we're wearing. I make a joke that if I'm wearing a bright red bra underneath white clothing, and I'm doing like a spinal curve and I'm teaching a movement class, everybody's just going to be thinking about my bright red bra, or if I've got like some fancy thing on my head. So even when it comes to whatever I'm doing, whether I'm leading ceremony or teaching a workshop, I'm very mindful that there's appropriateness to what I'm wearing and that I'm not trying to create a forced impression, so that people feel comfortable and again safe. And then my body language being open, noticing if anybody's body language is closed, that's a clue to whether they're open enough to be in that space. And then if there is closed body language, then maybe there's a need to take a little bit of breath, close the eyes, shut off one of the senses, drop people into themselves so they feel a little bit more comfortable. Maybe even if it's possible, get them to lie down, so that they just completely shut out for a moment, because like Cally said, sometimes people, it's a lot for them to be in that space. The other part of noticing who's there is there's always people that talk really little, and there's always people that could talk for the entire duration. And this is something that we experience in every retreat. And the interesting thing is the people that talk very little can sometimes fall into the category of people pleasers. So they won't usually say that it's a problem, but their body language and their eyes and their auric field will make it very clear, and something will just feel off. So it's really important, and we take it really important as the retreat leaders to pay attention to that and not expect the person that doesn't have that sort of confidence to speak up just because somebody else is speaking a lot. We have to hold that space and we have to bring the balance. So that might be making a disclaimer at the beginning so the people that talk a lot don't feel clamped, that we're going to set a timer on the duration that everybody shares so that everybody gets to share. So setting the boundary, but also sharing why and sharing it with love is really important. And then the final thing I say is that when we are sharing, encouraging and us embodying it as well, but encouraging the concept of listening to listen, not listening to respond, not listening to fix, not listening to heal. Even though this is a healing retreat, when we're trying to tap into the concept of listening, and even to heal, we first need to listen without trying to do anything. Otherwise, we are blocked by our own ideas, which are usually informed by a past experience rather than what we're in that present moment.
Well, that's some truth bombs right there. And it is, as you can see, really hard to hold space and lead, right? So it's funny to me to think about how this all has evolved for each of us individually and now collectively, but there's a lot of misnomers out there. And I try to make sure that we're really clear that we, the three of us, or at least I can speak for myself, I'm as flawed as the next person. I'm always trying to work on it. I try to be as vulnerable as I possibly can in a retreat space. For me, when I'm hosting or co-hosting, I want to share really deep, scary parts of myself so that I can set the tone that it's okay, that like I'm the most flawed version of myself all the time. I'm constantly working on it. And being in a retreat and hosting a retreat especially means nothing more than we're really working on it and we're holding space and energy for everyone to do the same. And it's funny because as I've gotten to know both of these women, they're evolving in their own way all the time as I am. And we talk about it very openly. And so it's so beautiful to hear how you're talking about listening and staying as mindful as possible, not being ahead, not thinking about what's coming next. And that requires a lot of decompression energy for us. You know, I always think it's special that we can go down a few days early and like bring our energy down, because, you know, there's a lot that always is going on in all of our heads, whether you're the participant or the leader in a retreat. And I think it's so cool to have people help you clear out the noise, right? So provide this environment and this food and to be seen. Like if David were sitting as my co-host, I think about him a lot. One of his deepest wounds is always that he always felt like he wasn't seen. And I think that's a common wound we all face, right? So when you get to a retreat, if we only can do one thing, is to provide you a space to see yourself for who you actually are. And it's underneath all of these exterior layers that we're trying to teach you to unzip them and let them hang out and just be and tap into what I call your essential self, which is like the you before the world told you who you had to be in order to be loved. And it takes a decent amount of self-work and responsibility, but I also think it takes a great amount of vulnerability and knowing that we behind the scenes have to have each other's back to say like, hey, did you get activated today? Like, do you need me to step in? Or knowing when the other person's really strong, weak, when you need a rest, when you've talked too much. I mean, Cally and I probably had near panic in many of our pre-presentation moments, like because we care so much, and we work so hard to put this material together. And we're experiential at the very most important part of my resume is experiential. I want to make sure that if I'm teaching something that I've actually personally walked some version of this story and some version of this presentation so that you can understand that I too know how difficult, at least it was in my lens, to walk this path. It's different than yours, but I know that there's always a ribbon of similarity that we've all experienced loss to some degree, and that this loss has shaped us. And therefore we want to hold space for you to walk through your path that way. And so that brings us to the next step in love, and the love acronym, which is to own your shit, like own it. And we own our shit at this table. I know that for sure, because we're very strong women, and being strong in my eyes means being open, vulnerable, brave to say that we don't know what we're doing all the time, but we're sure as hell trying every day to be mindful, to hold space, to love people for who they are deep underneath the outer layers. And I wanted to ask you guys about how it feels to do that push-pull between owning your own shit and holding space for others to own theirs. I think we set the stage really lovely for how hard it is actually to allow these people to be safe enough to listen inside. And then we have to be even deeper listeners as practitioners, right? We have to hear things they don't even know they know yet. And without actually leading them to something that may not be true, we have to hear and be intuitive enough to feel the energy around us and set the stage for them to pull open their own stuff, not for us to pull open things we think they have, but maybe just to know that there's a deeper knowing somewhere that they can help them get there on their own. So there's some autonomy to that, but also there's some intuition with that. How do you both help people honor and release these protective layers, and maybe talk about your own style, which I think you guys have similar and dynamically different styles to pull out the truer self, the essence of it within. And I will say that simultaneously, when hosting and taking workshops from both of you, I was a host and a leader of this and an owner of this company, and also was like the last retreat that I did with both of you, I cried and decided I was going to finally be brave enough to get pregnant despite being too old, too many children, second marriage, a widow. I mean, you can name the should not list was longer than the shoulds, and you both embraced me, and it was so beautiful. I had such a tear. I was watching your retreat go down. I was in bed breastfeeding my beautiful miracle baby after a little bit of a near-death experience. After you two literally set me, I didn't get pregnant too far off after our last retreat. I got pregnant in December, January, and we ended our previous retreat in November. And I was just thinking, it's not just the guests that get these powerful drop-ins. And as I witnessed both of you's power, it changed my life too. And new mom now, and I wasn't there, but I was feeling the energy of how transformative it can be to peel back layers of expectations of the outer world, which hold us back from our own true purpose and our own true wishes. And so I was wondering, maybe you guys would talk a little bit about your specialties and how you like to pull out the demons or the best parts of ourselves, truly.
I mean, I would say in regards to pulling out the demons, I think a lot of it comes from being brave enough to sit in the stillness with yourself. And this is why I really love IFS, internal family systems, of identifying that there are these parts of ourselves. And if you're masking hard enough and long enough, those voices really become so diminished that you can't really access them, or you can't really hear them. But if you sit long enough and you wait for those parts of yourself to respond or say something, they usually do, and they have something to say. And I always like to think and remind myself that if I'm hearing a voice in my head that sounds really loud and repetitive, it's probably not my soul or my true inner voice. And so if I pause long enough, then I can actually get to the root of what's bugging me, and talk about shame loops and shame spirals. And I think a lot of that comes from denying those voices and those parts of yourselves for long enough. And if we really want to get to the core of ourselves, like getting into the subconscious is really powerful, because that's a part of yourself that, that's why I love breathwork so much. You don't have to put words to your experience, and a lot of times your body, it has rules of its own and needs of its own, and if you follow your body and you follow what feels good, and a theme of this past retreat, and I kept saying it was follow what feels warm to you. And that's just an invitation to follow those small inklings of your intuition, because they're probably pointing you towards what you actually need. And I think that's the most important thing that we can all do, is like pause for long enough. And when we're in retreat spaces like this, it's taking away the distractions and the noise, the family stuff, the friend stuff, the work stuff. And even doing that for a few days, let alone we were there for a week, it's equally as powerful. But it's a reminder that we have to carve out the time to check in with ourselves, because if we don't, it's really hard to make that, like, to find those little pockets of time if you're not intentionally carving them out for yourself.
True.
I would agree with that totally. Something that I know when people book on retreats, because I book on retreats still and used to book a whole ton before even leading them. I was obsessed. And I always had this expectation to be with the practitioner like all the time, like, because you just fan on them and you just love them so much and you admire them. And it's really so it's really understandable to me when I lead retreats how much time people want to spend with me. But I have learned that I need to be aware, like you mentioned, Alix, of when I need that downtime so that I can reset. Tune in. By tune in, I mean that I wouldn't say I'm religious, definitely shamanic. And so tuning in with the energy of the earth, with my heart, with gratitude, so that I can really be in that right space. And then helping people to own their stuff. I feel that, well, one thing that's really important that I think me and Cally tried to emit on this retreat, and I know that you work on, Alix, is reminding people that there is really no hierarchy when it comes to wisdom in some respects. Like, there's a hierarchy with responsibility in terms of, oh, we are the leaders of the retreat. We're helping you have a great time, make sure that the food is good, the bedding's good, and everything like that. But when we're in a workshop container, we really have real respect for everybody that's in the room. There's no silly question. We're not afraid of somebody bringing in wisdom. We're not afraid of people challenging what we're saying. We're not afraid of understanding that although we've got a lot of experience and we've studied a lot and we've led a lot of retreats and experiences, that we still might not know something that's very specific to the person. And so we own that. And so we own our own humanness. And that helps people to own their own humanness. And I still remember, actually, Alix, it was really interesting that before you got pregnant, because I don't know if you know this, but after we had the cacao ceremony, and I tuned in and I was like, I feel like I should do this womb blessing one. Didn't know what was going on with you. And then after that, I spoke to your mother and I said, I know she's going to get pregnant soon. And she was like, yeah, I know she's going to get pregnant soon. And we kind of just like didn't say anything because we didn't want to jinx it, or like, one of those things. But I feel that you knew as well at that time that something was going to shift in you. And that ceremony was just a place for you, a ritual for you to unlock that part of yourself and to own yourself in a different way. So like Cally said, owning ourselves doesn't have to be through talk therapy. Breath work is amazing. Accessing the subconscious mind is really important. I also love breath work. Hypnosis can also be great for that. Us as leading the retreat, really making sure that we embody that principle as well.
Yeah, it's so beautiful too, because I was thinking in both of your specialties in the breath work, every time I take Cally's breath work, I have really like solidified these big decisions. And then funny enough, I had 2 pieces of permanent jewelry put on to represent each of these, that I was going to get pregnant, that I was going to sell Grace, Pilates and yoga, my stand-up. That was my previous one. And I did both of those. And it's interesting, all while, leading, you can be totally present and have these life-changing moments. And I think one of the beautiful things about some of these mindfulness practices that get you to stop getting into your head and more into your embodiment, or in an embodied space, is things come up that are deeper than your brain can even register. And so I remember the cacao ceremony that you're referring to. I really dug deep into something that really, I don't know, had come to my conscious mind yet. That was how powerful my womb space was for me. Being the mother of Carl's children, having to lose my ability to have children with him before I was maybe ready, or a deeper knowing that I was meant to be a mother. I think that I always have been working for others, and sometimes being a mother is maybe a less recognized or less celebrated. I don't even want to call it a job, but a title. And claiming that for me, that I didn't have to work and get the validation of the outside world, that I was good enough, that I could take time and slow down and be with my family and peel back some of these titles that I loved, but were eating up a decent amount of my energy to go outwardly versus inside my family that I had chosen. And it's really beautiful, because I think as a griever, as it never goes away. And I did lose my uterus. So like, how beautiful that blessing upon my uterus helped me to make that decision. And the world told me, or the universe, or any higher power that may have any control over anything, may have said, one last beautiful run. And my baby is just, I mean, every day she's just like a little bit of a magical, happy cooing, and she just loves her mom, and she reminds me to slow down. So it's really cool. Like, and then it's all wrapped up in like the passage of my children through this space that were shared with two beautiful men who have helped shape the person I am today. And so have my children. So it's cool. Like, right. Like, you can find all these beautiful things that you would never even know existed through all these beautiful practitioners that I'm lucky enough to, like, the universe sends me these people that just come on my path that not only change me, but like help me to help others. And I don't know, I'm so grateful to both of you. Breathwork and ceremonies such as cacao, which I didn't even know like had anything to do with womb cleansing. Like I had no idea what to expect, because we had just actually like met on that trip. And something so deeply profound spoke to me in both of those settings, that I just knew. I had a knowing, and that's really what it's about. So when you peel back the protective layers and the demons come out, all that is left, it's scary to take out the scary stuff. But when you remove some of those, even for just a moment, they continue to kind of want to come back, because that's their habit and their pattern. But you own them instead of them, they own you, right? Like, your story, you own your story instead of that story owning you. And I think there's some power in that, yep, I'm a widow. And yep, I get a right to be remarried. And no one in the world, despite my age or my circumstances, is going to tell me when I'm done having children. Only my body can tell me that. Right. And being a griever, I get to grieve and love Carl, and I get to have a life with David, love him, and create a whole new family. And both of those can coexist. And that's so cool, like, that we teach that, because I don't think the world in general holds space for that kind of dichotomy, nor is there a lot of spaces to go. And I laugh with both of you. I've been like in proximity to other retreats, and this is no shaming on anybody's retreats. I'm like, oh my God, we are so deep. We are so deep. And we have like a million workshops. I mean, we probably don't even get all the workshops done most of the time, because we have so much content to present to you to get in the heart.
I was going to say, I forgot to mention about owning, I forgot to mention that two important workshops that really help people, because sometimes people are cognitive. We did one on the, Cally did one on the nervous system, understanding what's happening on the different levels of our nervous system, whether when we're balanced, when we're in fight and flight, and when we're really in a joyous space. And then I led a couple one on confidence and boundaries, and another one on ancestral healing. And so, for example, with the confidence and boundaries, what are 3 things that you want to be more confident in? As in, what do you want to own? Like, what lost parts of you that you want to own? And what boundaries and support do you need to put in place for those to happen? On the ancestral healing, is that really yours, or was it inherited from society or from your lineage? So, because I know there's going to be people listening that are like, I don't know about cacao ceremony and breath work. I've tried that. we do a lot of, we do different styles of, you could say, education and experience. It's not that you're either not into breath work or you are. It's that sometimes you might just not, it's a somatic thing. So sometimes our bodies respond to talk, sometimes our bodies respond to breath, sometimes it responds to movement. So we make sure that we fuse all of those in. So yeah,
agreed. I think
you're right. It is a very deep retreat. Yeah.
I think the biggest part of everything that we do, and like hearing both of you share those things, it's like what we're really trying to do is encourage people to embrace a deeper level of curiosity about their own stories and what's happening in front of them. Because if you're seeing something or you're feeling something and you're like, instead of running with it and letting it lead you through your life, you're acting on like an emotion or a feeling. If you ask yourself, like, what is this feeling maybe trying to tell me? Maybe it doesn't mean that you have to go run like a 10K because you're super anxious. Maybe it means that you just like need to dance or something. Like the other day I woke up and I was like, why am I feeling kind of anxious? And I'm like, I think I just need to move my body, and like we'll like reassess afterwards. And so it's like getting curious and allowing that curiosity to lead you versus just acting on like the feeling or the emotion in the moment.
Well, it's so you're leading me right into the next core value, which is when we sit and talk about valuing ourselves and love and loving yourself. So we're building in this company a platform that helps educate those who are experiencing any kind of loss, which there's thousands of millions of losses in the world, how to love themselves through a hardship and get to the other side and recreate their life from this hardship. And I really do think the more that I practice loss, the more that I understand that Buddhism is so wise to say that we are living a life that is suffering. There is suffering. And from suffering, you will find your nirvana if within the educational piece of the suffering, not necessarily the pain itself, you peel back all this stuff for other people and love yourself enough to own and claim your life, right? And so when you're valuing yourself enough to take this big leap to go on a retreat, and let me tell you, when you're coming down to Comixto, Mexico, it is got some moments where even just getting there feels semi like a part of the retreat, because you fly into Puerto Vallarta. If you're non-Spanish speaking, you've got some language barriers. You're going through long custom lines. You have to go over to the maritime, find a boat. You get on a boat with, again, mostly Spanish speaking people who are going to private charter you down to this island. And I mean, the ocean is rough. You're going to be rocked around a little bit, but it's stunning. It's like all this beauty and all this unknown, and you're just chip choppy, like wavy water in this boat. And you're like, oh my God, where the hell am I going? And I remember the first time we went down there, I was like, holy shit, we could be like getting abducted right now. Like, I don't know where we're going. It's so stunning. There's mountains everywhere, jungle mountains. You're like, what, the whales coming out of the water? Literally, like
dolphins too. Dolphins. We have the dolphins
everywhere. I was like, it's like Moana meets like this unknown situation. And I swear to God, so we get down there, and then you're like, let it begin. Like, you're already kind of ready. Like, you got to carry your bags up these stairs, and you just like a lot of things that take a lot of trust. And so we really value that our customers and our clients and they're not our friends, like, trust us in this process. But it is a valuing of yourself to put down the financial investment to do a big retreat like this. This is not a small retreat. This is a big one. And we do big work in this retreat. That means we go deep, and we guarantee that you're going to walk out knowing yourself a little bit better, sitting inside of yourself long enough to peel out some stuff that maybe you're no longer wanting to carry. At least you're going to understand your nervous system and what triggers you up, and how you can give yourself some different patterns or different tools that we bring in to bring on resiliency in your world when you go back home. And so talk to me about the things that you guys do to value and love yourself a little bit to prep for retreat, or just to be a retreat practitioner. And then maybe on this retreat, like what you saw were some of the greatest self-love moments that you witnessed. Maybe you want to share a little bit, whether it's yourself or someone else. A lot of questions.
Cally knows what I'm laughing at.
Dionne, go first.
So with valuing, myself? Well, I mentioned it a little bit. I think I mentioned that I used to be obsessed, and I spent a lot on retreats in my early days before being a practitioner. To go back a step in my own personal story, I don't think I've mentioned this, but when I was 15, I was actually suicidal. I ideated, and I got through it, I think mostly because I was too scared. I was like, the wimp feeling. And then that was the first step. And then I got through it through love and support. And by starting to learn step by step how to value myself, it was a teacher at my college that really noticed me. So we talked a little bit about being invisible, right? So this is a common thing. If you're listening to this and you've been thinking about attending a retreat, there's a chance that you might feel invisible at times in your life, or at this time in some areas of your life. And so there's something really powerful when for a moment somebody sees you when you feel invisible, and that can be the first step to recognizing that, oh, there's enough value in me for me to value it because they see me. So I started then to spend money on courses to get curious, as Cally said, into what was going on in my mind and how things could be differently. And then almost every step I've taken in life since that point has been a case of choosing to value myself and choosing not to let myself be defined by the escalator, society's life escalator, which is you do this, you do that, and then you do that. And that's part of how I ended up in Mexico, and how I ended up moving out of climbing the corporate ladder to leading my own business and collaborating with Weight Wellness and all of these amazing things that I've been doing. And one of the key ways is every morning I check in. And then as much as I can, I try and make it a practice to have a deeper check-in and also be a student. So whether it's going to a yoga class, even though because I'm a yoga teacher, qualified yoga teacher now, there is definitely an ego part of me that's like, oh, I wonder if it's going to be a good class. You guys know what I'm saying. Like, we totally have to ground ourselves. Or whatever it is, I allow myself to be a student and sink into that space and then see what surfaces. And, to fast forward now and look more recently of just after this retreat, how I can value myself. One of the things I realized is that this is something I've mentioned on the other podcast with my sexual assault in Mexico. I had this moment where I was like, that was awesome. That was definitely awesome, how everything you've gone through and how you've managed it. And you could probably work a little bit less externally now for a period of time, maybe 6 months, and work on yourself and be with yourself a lot more. And so part of valuing yourself is that self-respect, reflection and introspection, and then noticing the voice that came up. So when I noticed that, I had the voice of, oh, but you love what you do. And, you haven't got your pension where it needs to be. Like all of these life logistic things came up. And then I came back to my heart, which is, and you want to be an embodiment of what you teach, and it's time. And so one of the things I've decided recently to value myself is to, I don't know if I can quote names, but everybody knows who I'm talking about, is to apply the 4-hour work week, but per day. And so I'm having 4-hour work days, and the rest of the time is self-care and going deeper into the sexual assault. Why? Because I felt on the grandest scale that everything was healed. But not being a healer and being a practitioner, I knew that was also a bit naive to say everything's healed. It's like with grief and with loss, when you've lost those parts of yourselves, it's like a door that is ajar, and then the wind can blow it open. And so I was doing my breathwork practice. I was doing an orgasmic breathwork practice solo because I'm single. I'm joking, solo. If anybody's listening.
Contact her if you need details.
If you're listening and you're not late. Anyway, yes, I was doing my orgasmic yoga, my orgasmic breathwork practice. And I noticed there was a part of me that I didn't allow myself to tap into the next level of pleasure. And then I had flashbacks from that sexual assault, and I was like, oh wow, I didn't feel upset, I didn't feel scared, but it was just confronting and interesting. And I got curious, and I thought, still something in my body, and maybe it's always going to be there. And so now I've committed to this, and maybe it will always be that way with the 4-hour days, maybe not. But for now, I decided to do that for the next 4 months until my birthday, and then see what I decide after that.
I love that. I love that you continue to value yourself. And I think that's really cool that we're talking about the layers, the deeper layers within. And so that's the thing about healing is it's if you look at it as I'm done, check that box, I'm done grieving. People think that, right? Like a certain point, like you shouldn't really be grieving. You shouldn't be working on yourself. You should be able to get over. And I do think integration is crucial and building around and beyond the trigger or the loss is important. But as you grow in your healing and your self-love and you value yourself, you're going to continue to peel out deeper and deeper parts of yourself. And I think loss and grief and anything as hard as a sexual trauma it's a part of you forever. The wounded part, it won't define you, but there will always be, I think, new discoveries about it if you're brave enough to do what you're doing, which is taking time to heal and look at it, at the
and it's scary to take that time as well, because I wouldn't want, and this might be my ego, but I wouldn't want people to feel that I don't want to work or that I don't work hard. And what I learned is that there's a difference between being busy and productive and making progress, and you can delegate and all of these things. But it definitely, just to bring up before passing it to Cally, that valuing yourself can bring up guilt when you start to learn to do it, because it's different, and there's always going to be someone that will say, for example, you only work 4 hours. They don't know what I'm doing in those 4 hours. They don't know how much I'm doing, and I could be doing it 7 days a week, and if we compared ourselves, maybe they are working 8 hours in an office, but out of those 8 hours, 4 hours is actual work. So it's really sitting with ourselves and then having the confidence, because it can bring up a lot of guilt, a lot of shame, projected, also internalized. So yeah, a big part of it is, and I would say accountability, support, and speaking it out to people that you can trust, that love you when you're saying what you want to do to value yourself, so that they can validate you. External validation, I think, is really important at that stage of valuing ourselves.
Well, and I think that that's a really big goal of ours, is to create a community where you can speak your truth, where you can say, I'm working on self-love and valuing myself, and the person wouldn't judge you, right? Because we all need those spaces. We need those friendships. We need those people that understand that it's not selfish to love yourself. And if you're anyone who's saying that, that's a projection of a non-valuing of yourself. That's a projection of a protective layer that you might need a retreat to dig into a little bit, because we really only get one life. And when you have a big loss, and like I have, you kind of lose those people anyway, or you're going to die if you try to keep everybody happy. And so you learn to quiet the noise in a deep, deep grief. And we're sort of simulating that in retreat. So Cally, tell me about you. How do you like to define the word valuing yourself or self-love? Maybe both for you, or was there anything at the retreat that really stood out to you that was like, wow, that was a transformative moment of valuing yourself or self-love?
Oh, definitely. I'm literally listening to Dionne talk about this, and then things that you've said in this podcast already, Alix. I'm like, boom, 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 like all these different ideas that pop up.
We need another workshop. This is why we have such deep retreats. We can't stop.
Yeah. I think a big thing that I've learned with myself particularly is that I need to honor how deeply I feel, and I can immediately tell when I'm not doing that, or when I'm trying to be a certain, like hold myself in a certain way, especially as a teacher. Sometimes like in the last retreats that we've done, I've had probably the easier job of just like coming in to teach classes. And then it's like classes that I'm like, okay, no one's really like looking at me. It's not like a conversation as much. And where my anxiety stems from a lot of the times is like social anxiety, because I could look at somebody who's just looking at me with a neutral expression and they could be engaged, right? And I could go in my brain and be like, they look like they're not enjoying themselves. I'm terrible. It's my fault. It's my fault, you know? And really learning how to value myself in showing up honestly as I am. Like there was the nervous system regulation workshop that I did that Alix usually leads. And there was anxiousness that I had before it. Alix, I had called her like the week before. I was like, I'm overthinking this and I don't know if it's gonna translate. And there was a point in it, and like the first day or so of the retreat, where I felt like I had my head in my notes. And I'm like, oh, so if I stay here, it's me and my notes versus like me and the other people who are here. And the notes that I've written are coming from my heart and my soul. So I'm like, I don't need to rely on these things that are written down. And there was kind of like and I think we all have some version of this eventually, but there was kind of this fuck it moment. Mm-hmm. And when I felt that, I was like, fuck it. And Alix, what you had talked about before were the importance of sharing our own stories and the things that we've been through, and the fact that there's no hierarchy to trauma and pain and sadness and joy. And that's where I get a lot of my value from, is sharing honestly, seeing how that impacts other people and how that deepens the connections that are in front of us. And disarming myself so that others can do the same, not because I know more or I'm doing more, but just because we're all humans in this wild experience. And there's going to be times where things might feel like a regression, but I don't really view anything as a regression, because I think there's parts of ourselves that maybe are coming up from past versions and they're saying, hey, I need attention here. And we have to honor those parts of ourselves. You had asked another question, but my brain went total ADHD, and now I'm too far down the path.
I don't think so. I think you're down the right path.
About what we did on the retreat to value ourselves. Talk at the photo shoot. You can talk, because I talked a lot.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Shout out to Katie.
Shout out to Katie, who made everyone do a photo shoot. We've tried to do this multiple years, and it kind of flew by the wayside.
Well, I feel like it's going to be a standard in every retreat going forward, because a lot of people can feel uncomfortable being seen, especially in front of a camera. And I think it's such a good practice. I mean, talk about being curious and like going through something that feels a little bit uncomfortable, but you get outside the other end and you're like, wow, I kind of like standing a little bit taller, like I'm holding myself, I'm feeling a little bit more empowered and embodied. And doing this photo shoot, we were on the beach and we were in the water. It was a full sensory experience, let me just tell you that. But it was so powerful. And it's so interesting when you start something like that, where you might feel a little bit coy or a little bit shy in the beginning. And there's a moment of kind of that, oh, fuck it moment, or that surrender, that it just falling into the playfulness of things like that, even allowing yourself to be seen, feeling sexy and feeling yourself. Like that's juicy stuff. And then in terms of like valuing myself and valuing my own needs, there were multiple times during this retreat, because we're in these roles of holding space, there's a lot of times that can feel overstimulating. And so I really tried my best, and I told myself this before I went on this retreat, and I'm like, it's okay for me to take stillness for myself. And we had such an amazing team where we could trade off if we needed to, or kind of look to each other and support each other when we needed to, because you are holding a lot of space and you're hearing a lot of traumatic stories. And these things hold weight, and they're beautiful stories, and they need to be told. But there also has to be kind of like closing practices for ourselves in that, so then we are valuing our own time and our own energy and our own heart. Definitely.
It's so powerful. And I mean, shout out to Katie. I think, you know, one of the things that has always attracted me to her as a person is, first of all, she's really just will be able to see anything that you put on the table as valuable. She looks and sees inside of people and really looks for the good. And like, and I think she captures that. And it's funny, as I've been trying to find a local photographer to take baby pictures, because she's been so, you know, obviously so busy to fly from Nashville to San Antonio. I've been looking for, I didn't realize I was looking for what she does, which is to capture the love and the soul of people. Like and she makes you feel beautiful. You'll like come into those shoots looking like haggard mess and feel like so not good about yourself. And she has a way of capturing like the most beautiful parts of yourself that maybe you've never seen before. And I think, isn't that just such a beautiful summary of what a retreat really is? It's all we're doing is providing space for you to see yourself, holding up a mirror and helping you peel out some layers that maybe are holding back you seeing yourself for who you really are. And I think both of these women do that so beautifully, both for themselves in the world and for others. And you know, the last step of any retreat and in the platform that we're teaching in general is embracing it, right? So it's really about returning to love, embracing yourself, choosing life for me, and choosing love again. And that can mean loving yourself. That can mean, we have people leave retreats. I mean, I can't tell you the transformations and the integrations have been massive after Wake Wellness retreats. We've had people get divorced. Almost somebody has left their husband every single time, and we are not promoting that per se, but I think they already knew inside themselves that what needed to happen, and this was the catalyst. So I think are, you know, whatever the chemical reaction, people we're the underbelly of it, causing this like peel off the top layer and ready to like commit to ourselves. And so I wanted to talk to you guys about embracing self-love, choosing to take this all home with you, and how do we integrate. It's really hard. It's hard as a practitioner. You come home, you're like, you're like in this like bliss moment. And then you got to like, even the traffic of getting back home, the noise, you know, you start to, your sensory overload when you return to life from something as blissful as Mexico. How have you been integrating? How have you been doing? And of course, like, how do you like to keep up with our people as they integrate, or teach them tools to get back home?
I would say oh, you go. Yeah.
No.
No, please. I don't want to be first. I don't like
you. Just started.
Counterclockwise. Why don't you want to be first?
Go, Cally.
I would say for myself, this has probably been the most challenging integration post-retreat. It was the longest retreat that we've had thus far, only by, I think, 2 days versus last year. But I mean, it can make a big difference because you're checking out of the reality that you're so accustomed to, and you're going to this beautiful place. You're learning such amazing things, deep things, life-changing things. And then coming back and trying to reinsert yourself into the chaos of the world, especially post-election when things are changing, like there's a lot of emotions that are coming up. There would be little tiny things that don't usually annoy me, like dishes piling up on the counter. And I was like, why am I enraged by something? But it was just, you know, anytime that we come out of these retreats, it's like the most valuable, an important, crucial time for myself. And I feel like these are the big shifts. It's like going into a cocoon, and I kind of isolate for a little bit because I think the integration is so very important. And, you know, talking about valuing yourself and your own needs, the amount of times that because the shower and like being in water is really important for me. It's like my active meditation. And I feel like I have looked forward to just like sitting and reflecting in the shower so many times over this past time post-retreat. But honestly, I think having the WhatsApp and having this connection point for all of us, which not that we're able to connect every day because lives are busy, but knowing that there's a soft place to land within a community that we have built these connections inside of, planning for future FaceTimes or Zoom meetups, so then we can talk about how everyone's been doing post retreat. I think having those things as like a foothold is incredibly important. And just in terms of reminding people that they are not alone, and these weeks can feel really intense, and you're peeling back all of the layers of this onion that you think you are and getting back down to the core of yourself. I mean, I talked about this on the retreat, and to me, I love a visual, but I would think about those kind of sand sculptures that you'd get like in Florida or something, where they do the layers of different colored sand and you can make different designs with it. It's kind of what our lives look like before a retreat. And you're like, well, I've meticulously placed everything into this perfect little box, and maybe a lot of those layers are really great, but then maybe there's something, a few layers on the bottom or like weaved in, that are not serving you. And you have to dump it all out in order to put the pieces back together and like really intentionally choose the person that you want to be going forward. Like, how will you want to fill yourself going forward? And all of those things are a choice. So I think the integrating can take time, and like anything, there's no like expected time limit or a frame of time that somebody would be done integrating and processing. I think these are tools that we take on and we try to integrate over the rest of our lives. Yeah.
Agree. How about you, Dionne?
Yeah, I would agree. I think building on what Cally said, it's a case of being really honest, maybe unashamedly honest. Honest about, like you mentioned, changes in climate, changes in the people that you're around. These are all honestly going to have an impact on you, and honest about how you feel about that. Like, maybe you love your family and you're not looking forward to being around them. That can coexist. So, like something that you were talking about, Alix, before, is like things coexisting. That doesn't lessen the love. It's just the reality is like Cally, you describing the difference between being in sunny Mexico to being in the States when it's winter and it's cold. And if you've just been really enjoying that sunshine, and then all of a sudden, literally within a few hours, you're in a total contrast. You have to be really honest about how that impacts you. Otherwise, you put a block to your own integration without that honesty of where you're at. And so I think for me, the keys to integration are that honesty. And then the other part, another big part, is the relationships, because I can go and so one of the things that we work on, I feel, in this retreat is our habits. And I think a lot of people that are grieving self-isolate. And so we could easily go on this retreat and come out of it and integrate, but be integrating in one way really well, but in another way be self-isolating and creating a dialogue that nobody understands us, and that our families and friends and our partners don't get us, and all of this. And so Cally also mentioned about us having integration virtual calls. It's always nice when we can meet in person, but we've also got to realize, I think, that it's also amazing that we've got this digital landscape now that can support and make things a lot easier. And then where you can meet in person with those that, a lot of the time when we have these retreats, people can meet up after the retreat if they're in the same country, in the same city, or even if not, people can visit each other. But also looking for those smaller groups and those smaller things that can create a continuum. So whether it's, say, a local yoga class, it won't be the same. It's not going to be Cally's class, but it still supports with that integration. You can close your eyes, pretend it's her, and and then on the relationship side, getting some support, whether it's, I work a lot with the relationships, as I've mentioned, but I always say not all our needs are met through one person or one resource. There's so much resource online about how to argue better, how to understand our partners better. Oh, you can literally type into the internet, I've just come back from a retreat and I feel like I'm clashing with my partner all of a sudden, and you'll get some feedback on how you can address that. And so remembering with compassion that you're integrating, but also your family and friends are going to be integrating with this new version of yourselves. It's very easy to fall out of love, remembering love is that choice, and that maybe we've leveled up and they are about to level up. They just haven't their retreat yet because they were busy watching the kids while you were on your retreat.
Exactly.
I know all the men are going to love me for saying that.
Actually so true though, because you come home
true,
as this elevated version of yourself. You've seen the actually realist parts of yourself that maybe you don't know how to access at home with this, the world you've built. And now it's easy to see and be in that space when it's ideal, right? When you have someone cooking for you, when you're not working, when the kids aren't yelling, when you don't have to clean anything, and when you have beauty around you and people supporting and seeing you. But when you integrate back into life, a lot of things you see in the perfection and the going of the inside become extremely difficult and quite risky to share with our loved ones at home. And so when you go back home, take it easy on yourself. And for the loved ones who might have just captured one of our retreat guests, we're hopeful they take it easy on you and you take it easy on them, because they're going to try to figure out how to bring some of this essential self into your world and integrate all these tools to stay regulated and to stay centered and to stay honest and authentic. And that's really what Wake Wellness is about, when we're talking about the love framework, we're talking about listening, going inside. And I pause for our listeners to take a second and just notice if today, have you taken a moment to hear and listen to the sensations of your body that are miraculously doing all of these, cellular functions without us even having any awareness, and that we have this body and this life inside of us that requires us to slow down and hear what we need and what the body is asking of us. And then we ask you to think about what's this emotional connection to all of that it resides inside of us, and how do we own the story of who we are. For me as a person, how do I own that I'm a widow, that I'm choosing to love again, maybe even more with more ferociousness than I ever have before. And maybe this love is even more grand than it was before, and owning that because I've worked through a lot to get here. And then how do we value this inside space? How do we value ourselves and love ourselves with the boundaries that they're talking about, with the work and the space that we need to do this work to live our most authentic life? How do we value our life? How do we take care of ourselves? And at home, I'm asking you this, like, how are you valuing yourself in this holiday hustle and bustle? And at the very end of it, it's the embracing of all that we need to build and do all the energy we need to put out into the space around us to create this very one life that we know of, because time is fragile. And I continue to always be surrounded with death, and death is standing almost like this little teacher right over my shoulder, telling me to tell others or teach others, it's right one moment that we can be here, and one moment it can be taken from us. And I know that I just popped into this random journal of Carl's today that was like a time hop thing on my phone as I was looking for stuff for my holiday card. And he was literally writing a journal letter to me to blog, but he was angry. And so it was like not a blog that made it on the blog because it didn't fit his MO of generally putting it positively out there. He was feeling the reality of his existence. And this was 2 months before he died. And he was saying, like, he hadn't always done and chosen correctly. And he was feeling the regret of choosing work and choosing busyness and choosing perfection and choosing philanthropy, which is a hard thing to say, choosing helping others over listening to himself and being present in his life, which was his children, myself, and, even himself. And that time had surpassed him with his disease, and that he was at that moment too sick to choose himself and get up out of bed and do what he really wanted to do in the life. And I read that today, and he was saying in every moment and in every breath that we take, there is life and there's love. And it was so crazy when I read this today. I was like, oh my God, I've literally built an entire company. I've built an entire life based on this letter, which I just found for the first time. I mean, it's been in my phone, so I obviously recognized it, but I wasn't integrated. I wasn't listening. I was just in grief. And I read it today and thought, and I shared it with David, and I was like, oh my God, he would be really proud of us. He would be really proud of us. And I think everyone in this room is doing that, right? Like they're living each breath and they're living their life. And we're teaching others to do that because you only get one. And it's really, really important that we don't let the noise and the pull of others' opinions of us and the perfectionism and the not enoughness, or the not being seen. And we keep hiding and hiding and hiding. And so this is a long podcast, but for those of you listening, this is a new year. Take care of your nervous system. Don't try to press all this bullshit about being skinny and blah, like shit that makes you feel terrible. Feel good. Do what makes you feel alive. Get embodied and come join us on a retreat if you need a little bit of help. And Cally and Dionne and myself, we all actually work independently and we're here for you. If you just reach out, find us, connect with us, we'll find you what you need. We're here as experiential people who are still trying to fucking listen and figure it out and not doing it well. Dionne can contest and Cally can contest that we don't have it all figured out, but we do know how to get you to look inside. And so I'm so grateful to everyone in this room. And I'm going to let you guys, ladies, finish maybe with one word that sums up what you think about the Wake Wellness Rebirth or a rebirth of your own that you're working on in the new year. No pressure, Cally.
I've been thinking about it already.
Yeah, I knew this bitch would come at me with something like this.
I'd say for me, it would be bravery, because the bravest thing that we can do is to choose ourselves and honor our own needs. And curiosity, obviously. I feel like that's like a title of every chapter of my life thus far.
I love that. I love curiosity too.
I'm just going to go with the word that came to my mind, which is blossom. Yeah, it reminds me of flowers. I'm a spring baby as well, so there's definitely some bias in it, but like blossom, and I invite the guests to get themselves a flower, no matter what gender you are, get yourself a flower and look at it as a symbol of you blossoming into your truth. And the beautiful thing about flowers is even when they're crushed and they die, they turn into a fragrance. So they're still living. They're still like this aura, this beauty to them. So yeah, blossom.
I feel like my word is going to be joy. I'm like really looking to celebrate the joy in my world that I've worked so hard to be where I am. And instead of like, I sometimes like level up. Like, I'm like, what's the next thing I have to tackle to continue to stay on this? Like, I feel like I'm doing exactly what I just said. I like subconsciously have taken Betsy and Carl's losses and I look at the ramifications of them and all that they're missing with our children every day. And then I look at Genevieve as like, this is choice of ours and like how we're owning our own new story, new path. And I'm like, sometimes I have to sit and feel the joy and I need to create more joy in my world. And I was singing in the car with my daughter last night and I had to like leave the baby and had all this anxiety about leaving the baby because she won't take a damn bottle and like all these things to get to like do one thing with one child. And my daughter loves to sing and her dad, Carl, loved to sing. He had a terrible voice and it was like a running joke. It was terrible. Could never hit a tone deaf, but loved to sing. And she actually is not tone deaf, as in singing lessons, and loves to sing. And there we were driving. She was singing this like Adele song about her inner child. And Take It Easy on Me. And literally I was crying. I was just overcome with joy that like, when did I lose this part of myself? I used to love to sing when I was her age. And I was thinking of myself when I was young. And I was thinking of Adele talking about her young inner self. And I was looking at my beautiful child, like just enjoy and singing and connecting to this part of herself. And I was thinking like, I have to build more joy in my life because as a griever, it's easy to attach to the loss and not the repercussions of the beauty behind the loss, which is like all this goodness and all this happiness that we worked hard to get here. So thank you everyone so much. I hope that we're going to find curiosity. I hope that we're going to find joy. I hope that we're going to be a flower and watch ourselves blossom this year. And I just am so grateful to both of these women. They have literally changed my life. I would not have my daughter if it wasn't for both of you. And it's so powerful how community can hold up these mirrors, making us brave enough to make huge, scary choices. And I'm so grateful to both of you for your energy, for all the healing work you do in my life every day and in the retreats. So if you want to reach out to us, we're all here for you in the community of Wake Wellness, and we're growing in love this year in our platform. And Cally and Dionne are going to be hosting not only coaching, it'll come out soon enough. We're working on the platform, but we're going to be doing more retreats. Cally is like fired up, and so is Dionne. They're going to drag my tired mom ass out of slumber, and we will be doing more retreats. So just stay tuned, watch us on Instagram, follow us, check the show notes out. That's going to have everything you need to find us. So thank you, ladies. It's a long podcast, but it was a good one. Happy holiday season. Hope everyone's having a great post-holiday integration.
Love you.
Happy holidays.
If you enjoyed this episode of Wake the F Up, please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Join the Wake community by downloading our app. Just search for The Wake Wellness in the Apple or Android App Store. And follow us on Instagram at The Wake Wellness. Thanks for listening.